Varric 7 stood at the edge of a vast, desolate landscape, his crimson eyes scanning the horizon with cold indifference. Earth was a backwater planet, insignificant in the grand scale of the galaxy. His mission was simple: assess the dominant species. If they were found lacking, he would eradicate them. It was not personal, it was policy. He had done this 100 times before. The dust swirled around him as he activated his command interface, a holographic display appearing above his gauntlet. A single message pulsed in the alien tongue of his overlords. Challenge the strongest. Determine worth. The process was elegant in its simplicity. Every species had warriors, champions, those who defined the strength of their kind. Varric 7 would call for a duel, and the outcome would dictate humanity's fate. He had faced warlords, battle priests, entire legions of so-called ultimate warriors. None had lasted more than a few minutes. As he took his first step toward civilization, he chuckled. This was going to be quick. The explosion of gravel under spinning tires echoed across the empty desert highway. A battered Ford Bronco rolled to a stop, and a man stepped out, adjusting his worn-out cowboy hat. Wade Callahan, U.S. Marshal, took one look at the towering, armored figure before him and sighed. "All right, buddy," Wade called out, resting his hand on his revolver. "You want to tell me what kind of trouble you're fixin' to start out here?" Varric 7 turned, expecting to see a soldier or perhaps a scientist. Instead, he found a middle-aged man in jeans, boots, and a leather holster. No power armor, no advanced weaponry, just an old-fashioned badge pinned to his chest. The executioner tilted his head. "You are enforcement?" Wade took a deep breath. "That's right. And you're trespassing. So how about you put your hands where I can see 'em?" Varric 7 processed this. In all his years of planetary assessments, no species had ever not known who he was. This was either ignorance or arrogance. Either way, it didn't matter. "You do not understand," the executioner said. "I am here to pass judgment. Your species will either prove itself or be." The crack of a gunshot split the air. Varric 7 barely had time to react before something slammed into his chest, knocking him back a step. His armor absorbed the shot, but a small, visible dent formed on the surface. He stared down at it in shock. Wade Callahan spun the revolver in his hand and holstered it. "That was a warning shot. Next one's gonna hurt." The alien's mind reeled. That was not supposed to happen. Varric 7's shock quickly gave way to anger. He raised a hand, charging his energy field, ready to vaporize this impudent human. "Now, hold on a second," Wade said, rubbing his chin. "You're here to judge us, huh? You come all this way just to pick a fight?" The executioner's hand paused. "It is the way of my people. The strongest warrior represents the whole. I have tested many species. None have survived." Wade let out a low whistle. "Sounds like a real fair system you got there. Bet you never tried it on someone who grew up breaking horses and cleaning out bars full of drunk cowboys." Varric 7 narrowed his eyes. "You mock me." "Not yet," Wade said. "But I figure if you're so dead set on a fight, I might as well make it interesting." The executioner had never faced anything like this. Normally, the challengers were prepared, warriors who came armed with the best weapons of their civilization. But this man? He was treating it like just another day on the job. Varric 7 decided he would end this quickly. "You will fight me. If you land 3 blows, I will reconsider my judgment. But you will fail." Wade rolled his shoulders. 3, huh? All right, big guy. Let's dance." Wade squared his shoulders, rolling his neck with a faint crack. He had been in plenty of fights before, bar brawls, shootouts, even that one time a guy tried to run him over with a tractor. But this? This was new. Varric 7 loomed over him, standing at least 7 feet tall in his alien battle armor. His confidence was clear, and why wouldn't it be? He had just declared himself an executioner of species, a self-appointed cosmic judge who decided whether a world was worthy of survival. "Last chance, cowboy," Varric 7 rumbled. "Face me now, or I will select another. Wade adjusted his hat, brushing dust off the brim. See, that's the problem with you big types. Always talkin' before doin'. The executioner smirked. Then let us begin. In a blur of movement, Varric 7 lunged forward. Wade had expected a slow, lumbering brute, but the alien was fast, faster than any man Wade had ever seen. His instincts screamed at him to move, and he barely dodged the first strike, feeling the air split just inches from his face. Wade spun on his heel and fired off 2 quick shots. The first hit Varric 7's wrist joint, the second his visor. Neither shot penetrated completely, but both left noticeable damage. The executioner took a staggering step back, clearly caught off guard. That was 2. Varric 7 snarled, his voice laced with disbelief. Impossible! That's what they all say, Wade muttered. The executioner recovered quickly, sweeping an arm toward Wade in a backhanded strike meant to send him flying. Wade ducked, scooping up a handful of desert sand, and threw it directly into the alien's face. Varric 7 recoiled, blinded for just a moment. That was all Wade needed. He stepped forward, pressed the barrel of his Colt Python against the alien's forehead, and pulled back the hammer. That's 3, partner. Varric 7 froze. His entire existence had been built on the certainty that he was untouchable, that no species had ever been strong enough to even touch him 3 times in a fight. And yet, this human had done it within seconds. For the first time in his life, the executioner felt doubt. Wade took a slow step back, giving the alien a moment to process his failure. No, Wade said, lowering his revolver. I'd say you owe me some reconsiderin'. Varric 7's body trembled, his gauntlets clenching into fists. You are a trickster, he growled. Wade chuckled. Nope. Just a damn good shot. The executioner's armor suddenly shifted, plates sliding apart, revealing a new form beneath, one that pulsed with energy, no longer confined to the heavy metal shell. His true form was sleek, muscular, and radiating raw power. Wade sighed. They always get uglier when they get mad. Varric 7's voice was different now, deeper, unfiltered by his armor. You think you have one, human? You have only earned my real wrath. Wade checked his revolver, then reached into his coat and pulled out a second firearm, a sawed-off shotgun with a custom engraving on the stock. He gave it a small twirl before aiming square at the executioner's chest. Well, all right, Wade said, settling into a ready stance. Let's see what you got. The executioner moved like a storm, surging forward with inhuman speed, and this time, Wade couldn't fully dodge. The impact sent him skidding back across the sand, his boots digging deep into the earth. He coughed once, shaking off the hit. Most men would be dead after that. Wade just looked annoyed. You hit like my grandma, he muttered. Varric 7 wasn't listening. His form crackled with power, and he lashed out again, this time swinging in a pattern no human should have been able to react to. But Wade wasn't fighting power, he was fighting predictability. Varric 7 was strong. Wade had no doubt about that. But he fought like a soldier, relying on brute force and overwhelming his enemies with sheer strength. That worked fine against aliens who respected power alone. But humans? Humans didn't play fair. Wade weaved between the strikes, his reflexes honed from decades of facing down killers. He could read the executioner now, could see the little shifts in his stance before every attack. The moment Varric 7 overextended himself, Wade made his move. He reached into his belt and pulled out a third gun, an experimental firearm confiscated from a cartel bust, a tungsten core revolver built to punch through anything. The shot rang out, dead center in Varric 7's exposed ribs. The executioner roared in pain, stumbling back, his body flickering as his energy form struggled to hold itself together. Wade took a step forward, cocking the hammer of his revolver again. I don't care how fancy your people think they are, he said, voice calm. But you're in my jurisdiction now. Varric 7 staggered, one knee hitting the ground. This was not how this was supposed to go. The executioner had fought some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He had never struggled before, never been put in a position where he had to think beyond brute force. Yet this human, a simple lawman, by all accounts, had seen through him like a cheap bluff in a poker game. Wade stepped closer, revolver still aimed. "So, what's it gonna be? You still want to play executioner, or are you ready to listen?" Varric 7 slowly looked up, his breath heavy. For the first time in his existence, he was forced to ask himself a question he had never considered before. Had he been wrong? Varric 7 had never known fear. He had never needed to. Every fight before this had been a mere formality, a simple test to confirm what he already knew, that no species could match his strength. Yet now, as he stared up at the human who had put him on one knee, something new crept into his mind. Doubt. Wade watched him carefully, his revolver still aimed, but his finger was off the trigger. He wasn't looking at an executioner anymore. He was looking at a man who had just lost control for the first time in his life. The Marshal sighed and reloaded his revolver with the same casual ease as a man lighting a cigarette. "You know what your real problem is?" he asked. Varric 7 tensed. "You hit hard," Wade continued, "but you fight dumb." The executioner's eyes flashed with renewed fury. He pushed himself up, his body crackling with energy, and launched forward at a speed even Wade hadn't expected. The Marshal barely had time to dodge as the alien's fist crashed into the ground where he had stood, sending a shockwave through the desert. Wade rolled, his coat billowing behind him as he landed on one knee, revolver snapping up in an instant. But he didn't fire. Not yet. Varric 7 rose, panting, his eyes wild. "You mock me," he snarled. "Nah," Wade said, dusting off his pants. "I'm just pointing out that you fight like a rookie." Varric 7 rushed at him again, but Wade sidestepped effortlessly, watching the alien plow into a cactus and tear it apart in frustration. The problem was obvious now. The executioner was all power, no precision. Wade had fought men like that before, bruisers, muscleheads who thought being strong meant being invincible. They never lasted long against someone who knew how to think in a fight. Varric 7 roared and swung again. Wade ducked under the strike, grabbed the alien's wrist, and twisted, using his own momentum against him. Varric 7 crashed into the ground hard, dust flying up around him. The Marshal exhaled. "See? Rookie mistake." Varric 7 pushed himself up, eyes burning with rage. "I am a warrior of the executioner's order. And I'm a U.S. Marshal," Wade said, "which means I've thrown guys twice your size out of bars for less." Varric 7 hesitated. He had never met a species that refused to take him seriously. It was messing with his head. Wade holstered his revolver and reached into his coat, pulling out something much heavier. A modified Colt Anaconda, its barrel gleaming in the moonlight. "You want to see what a real fight looks like?" Wade asked, spinning the gun on his finger before aiming dead center at the executioner's chest. "Then let's do this proper." The first shot hit like a thunderclap. Varric 7 staggered back, clutching his chest, eyes wide with shock. His energy form flickered, destabilizing as the heavy round tore through him. The second shot sent him sprawling into the dirt. Varric 7 coughed, struggling to rise, but Wade was already walking toward him. "You ain't the first man I've had to put down for thinking he was judge, jury, and executioner," Wade said, cocking the hammer back again. "And I doubt you'll be the last." Varric 7's body crackled with pain, his mind racing. This shouldn't have been possible. This was just a human. A primitive. So why was he losing? Wade reached him, standing over the executioner with a calm that terrified him more than any battle he had ever fought. For the first time, Varric 7 felt something foreign clawing at the edges of his mind. "Respect. You don't fight fair," Varric 7 muttered. Wade smirked. "Buddy, if you wanted fair, you should have stayed in space." Varric 7 exhaled, his body slowly stabilizing. He could still fight. He could still win. But as he looked up at Wade, he realized something. Winning didn't matter anymore. Not against a man who had already beaten him in every way that counted. Wade reached down and tapped his badge. "This here's law," he he said. And in my jurisdiction, we don't go around killin' folks just because we think we're stronger than 'em. Varric 7 blinked. You fight for law? I fight for what's right, Wade said simply. The words hit Varric 7 harder than any bullet. He had always believed in strength, in judgment by battle. Yet this human had defeated him not just with skill, but with something deeper. Principle. The executioner slowly sat up, his muscles still aching. And if I choose to walk away? Wade twirled his revolver and holstered it. Then you walk away. Varric 7 stared at him. No species had ever been given a choice before. And yet, Wade was giving him one now. The executioner took a deep breath. His mission had been clear: assess Earth's worthiness. And in doing so, he had found something he had never seen in any other species. He had found a man who fought for something beyond himself. Varric 7 lowered his head. Perhaps I have been wrong. Wade grinned. First smart thing you've said all day. Varric 7 had never known defeat. Not like this. He had been bested before, but only by forces of nature, cosmic anomalies, ancient titans, things beyond flesh and bone. But this was different. This was a man, a lawman, standing over him with his revolver holstered, giving him the choice to walk away. The executioner exhaled, his energy still fluctuating as he tried to process everything. He could still fight, still try to win, but to what end? His mission had been to test the dominant species, and by every metric, he had failed the test, not them. He looked up at Wade, whose face remained as unreadable as ever. You spared me. Yeah, Wade said. I tend to do that when someone finally gets their head out of their ass. Varric 7 let out a dry, bitter chuckle. I was certain I would crush you. Buddy, I get underestimated for a livin', Wade said, adjusting his hat. You ain't special. The executioner finally pushed himself to his feet. The desert wind howled around them as the silence stretched. Finally, he made his decision. I will not call for extermination, Varric 7 said. Humanity is different. Wade smirked. You're damn right we are. The executioner tapped his wrist console, sending an encrypted signal back to his fleet. A message that would spread through the Galactic Council. Humanity is not weak, the message read. Stand down. Somewhere, light years away, officials would read those words in shock. For the first time in history, an execution had been called off. Varric 7 shut down his interface and turned back to Wade. I have never seen a species like yours before. One that does not seek power, yet wields it effortlessly. Wade gave him a long look. Power's a dangerous thing in the wrong hands, he said. Problem is, most folks don't know what the right hands look like. Varric 7 hesitated. And yours? Wade's smirk returned. Steady. The executioner nodded, a strange sense of relief washing over him. His mission was complete. Yet, as he looked around at the vast, empty desert, a thought struck him. What happens now? Wade stretched his arms, groaning slightly. Well, unless you got another planet to judge, I reckon you stick around a bit. Varric 7 blinked. Stay? You know, Wade said, gesturing toward the horizon. If you're real dead set on judging folks, you might as well see what humans really do when we're not shooting at things. Varric 7 frowned. You mean war? Wade sighed. Son, if you think fighting is all we do, you got a lot to learn. It wasn't long before the idea took hold. The next day, Wade walked into his small-town sheriff's office with a 7-foot-tall alien behind him, earning more than a few horrified stares from the locals. This here's Varric's, Wade announced, setting his boots up on the desk. He's my new deputy. Varric 7 glanced at him. I am? Sure, why not? Wade said. You came here looking to judge us, right? Well, how about you learn what law looks like instead of war? The executioner hesitated. He had never followed law before. He had only enforced it in the harshest sense. But Wade had shown him something he had never considered before: justice, not just power. And so, the unlikeliest partnership in history was born. Varric 7 learned that human conflicts weren't about dominance but about order, breaking up fights at the local bar, stopping a runaway truck, even rescuing a cat stuck in a storm drain. None of it made sense to him at first. He had spent his existence determining the fate of entire planets, and now? Now he was chasing down a drunk cowboy named Earl who refused to pay his tab. "You expect me to handle this?" Varric 7 grumbled as Earl flailed in his grip. "Yep," Wade said, leaning against his truck. "Gotta start somewhere." "But he is weak. He's also a pain in the ass," Wade muttered. "Which means you're learnin' what bein' a lawman's really about." Varric 7 sighed and dropped Earl gently onto the dirt. "I do not understand your people." Wade grinned. "Nobody does, partner. That's why we're still here." Meanwhile, across the stars, the message from Earth had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Varric 7 had been defeated by a human. The idea was terrifying to some, unbelievable to others. But one thing was clear: Earth was not to be engaged. Not out of mercy, but out of sheer caution. The galaxy had faced warlords, conquerors, and machines of destruction. But they had never faced a cowboy with a badge, a six-shooter, and a stubborn streak a mile wide. And for now, that was enough to keep them at bay. Life had a funny way of surprising even the most hardened warriors. Varric 7 had traveled across countless star systems, delivering judgment upon species who had the misfortune of crossing his path. He had expected Earth to be another footnote in his long, bloody history. Instead, he found himself standing on the porch of a dusty sheriff's office, wearing a hat that Wade had thrown on his head, trying to make sense of a world that refused to make sense. The locals had been wary at first. A 7-foot-tall alien wasn't exactly a common sight in a town where most folks still rode horses. But humans had a way of adapting to the absurd, and soon enough, Varric 7 became part of the scenery. "Hey, Deputy V!" called out old Mrs. Cooper from her porch, rocking back and forth on her chair. "You ever gonna pay me back for those cookies?" Varric 7 frowned. "I was not aware they required payment." Mrs. Cooper chuckled. "You're damn right they do. They were my best batch." Varric 7 turned to Wade, confused. "I was given these items freely. Does that not indicate they were a gift?" "Welcome to human economy, partner," Wade said, sipping his coffee. "Now go work off your debt. She'll put you to work on that fence." The executioner, destroyer of civilizations, conqueror of warriors, sighed and trudged off to fix a fence for an old lady. Varric 7 had faced countless foes in his time. But no battle had ever exhausted him as much as a day of small-town life. By the time he dragged himself back to the sheriff's office, Wade was already kicking back with his boots on the desk, reading a newspaper. "I have fought titans," Varric 7 muttered. "I have waged wars against the most feared warriors in the galaxy. And now you know what real work feels like," Wade said without looking up. Varric 7 collapsed into the chair across from him. "I am starting to believe I was given the harder punishment." "Yeah, well," Wade said, flipping a page, "justice ain't always easy." One evening, Wade and Varric 7 sat outside the sheriff's office, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that settled deep in a man's bones, making him forget about everything else for a while. "You ever think about what's next?" Wade asked, swirling the last bit of his whiskey in a glass. Varric 7 tilted his head. "Clarify. You came here to judge us," Wade said. "Now you're a damn deputy. What happens when your people come knockin'?" Varric 7 exhaled slowly. "If they come," he said, "they will ask why I did not complete my duty." Wade nodded. "And what'll you tell them?" The executioner thought for a long moment before answering. "That Earth is already judged," he said. "And it does not need an executioner. It needs protectors." Wade smirked. "Careful, V. You're starting to sound like one of us." The two men sat in silence for a long while, listening to the wind rustling through the dry grass. "You ever been in a proper duel before?" Wade asked suddenly. Varric 7 frowned. "Every fight I have been in was a duel." "Nah," Wade said, shaking his head. I mean a real Western duel. 2 men. 1 street. High noon. First to draw wins. Varric 7 considered this. That is, inefficient. That's the point, Wade said. Ain't about efficiency. It's about respect. The next morning, word spread through town. Marshal Callahan and Deputy V were going to have a duel. People gathered in the street, setting up chairs and placing bets. Mrs. Cooper made lemonade. The town drunk brought a harmonica. Someone even set up a camera, figuring that an alien cowboy duel might be worth something. Varric 7 stood on one end of the street, adjusting the belt Wade had given him. He had insisted that the executioner wear a proper gun holster for the duel, even if the weapon inside was only loaded with blanks. Wade stood at the other end, hands loose at his sides. The town clock tower ticked closer to noon. You sure about this? Varric 7 asked. Fastest draw in the universe, Wade said, rolling his shoulders. Figure we oughta settle that once and for all. Varric 7 took a breath. He had never hesitated before a fight. But something about this was different. The clock struck noon. Both men drew. A single gunshot rang out. Dust settled. Wade slowly holstered his gun, a smirk playing at his lips. Varric 7 looked down at his own gun. His shot had landed, but so had Wade's. A perfect tie. The town erupted into cheers and laughter. Varric 7 exhaled and looked at Wade with something he had never felt before. True admiration. You are not like any species I have encountered, he admitted. Wade grinned. Welcome to Earth, partner. As the celebrations carried on, the 2 men stood side by side, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Somewhere out there, the galaxy still turned, and dangers still lurked. But for now, there was peace. And for the first time in his existence, Varric 7 was perfectly fine with that.